Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here. We're closing out 2023, so let's get into some of the worst movies of 2023. And to be honest, I kind of avoid movies that I know I'm not gonna like, things that are gonna be shit bombs and I already have my mind made up on them. And yeah, sometimes it's a little bit unfair, but I could usually gauge whether a movie's gonna be for me or not. And when you have something like The Nun 2, for example, where I hated the first one, I was pretty sure I wasn't gonna like the second one, and it sounds like it's gonna be more of the same, I'm gonna probably fall into line with that belief, and I'm most likely not gonna check it out, if not for a very long time. Same thing with the Marvels, that would most likely be on this list. It sounds like it has pretty much every flaw that I would have expected it to have, so, maybe I'll check it out if it comes on streaming that's not on Disney+. But until then, I'm not gonna bust my ass to watch this movie just to throw it on a worst of the year list. And honestly, most of these movies on this list, I don't even think are terrible. Most of the time, it's movies that I went in wanting to like, or at least ones where I had a general expectation that I would enjoy them and then came out more disappointed than anything. I don't go into movies looking for shit bombs. I don't watch terrible movies on purpose. I don't want to waste my time on that. Maybe I'll do it for a review or something, but just so much effort and it's just not always worth it. But I guess we'll just get to the bottom of the list, and what I'd say in last place in terms of what I think the worst of the year are, I'm just gonna have Shazam 2. I went in kind of expecting it to be the way that it is, and honestly, I was pretty unoffended by it when I watched it, but just the more I think about it, the more I think of its flaws and what's wrong with it. Mainly the fact that it kind of forgets anything that was unique about that first movie, what most people enjoyed about it, and it kind of decided to go with that classic sequel flaw of just going bigger, but then it's just also more of the same, nothing impressive, and then by the end of it you get a very forgettable cape shit movie that isn't terrible, it's not bad by any means, but it's just so mid, to the point where it's just forgettable in the end. I'm probably not going to watch it again. I'm probably not going to ever think about it again. And I'd say that this is almost a placeholder for kind of the way that most DC movies were this year. Even though I think Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2 are probably a good amount better, but that's a low bar, so it doesn't really mean anything. But as for the last kind of place, Shazam 2. Next up, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. I don't think that I hated this, nearly the amount that other people did. I kind of got a chuckle out of it, and because my expectations were so low, it was able to rise above them a little bit. But this is not a good movie. This is a pretty dumb, schlocky, low-effort movie. It was churned out for so cheap. You could tell that they didn't really give too many shits about it, but they're laughing all the way to the bank, and now we have Bambi, Winnie the Pooh 2. We're getting a whole cinematic universe because they were able to make this for so cheap and it made such a profit, and just basically on a gimmick. I think the hate, I 100% understand it, but I just can't find it in myself to hate it the same amount as other people. It's almost like Jeepers Creepers Reborn, where it feels just so incompetent and stupid that I have a hard time really getting angry at it. But it still definitely deserves a place on this list, so Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, it's on here. Now for next up, May December. And this is really kind of a weird movie because I don't think it's bad, but I think that a lot of the movie is just so slow. It doesn't really go anywhere, and it feels like it doesn't have anything to say despite the subject matter being pretty serious. It deals with a lot of pretty serious issues, but the movie just kind of meanders around, and it never feels like in the end it's actually saying anything. You get some great performances, especially Natalie Portman. She was probably the most interesting part of the movie, but it still kind of fell flat in the end because it had so many ideas, themes, that it seems like it thinks that it's a little bit smarter than it is. So it ends up being on this list pretty safely. Next up on the list, The Tutor. And this movie is capital S fucking stupid. This might be probably the actual worst or second worst movie on this list, but what kind of puts it back here a little bit is that I didn't have expectations for it the way that I was let down by some movies above this. So it's a little bit further back than it normally would have been, but this is a terrible film. I actually caught it just last night on Netflix, and my God, is it fucking bad. It actually starts out kind of interesting with this tutor-student relationship. You know, there's some weirdness there, and I think that it was starting to go into interesting places, but the movie just got so dumb, it got really convoluted, and then it had another syndrome of this thing where it thought that it was a lot more clever than it was, and it felt like a wannabe version of The Stepfather. It gets so out of control, cartoonish, silly by the end of it, that it just loses all credibility that it had before. But even before that, it takes a turn at some point, and the movie goes nowhere but downhill from there. Absolutely dreadful fucking movie. Do not recommend it in any way. I'm surprised that they got some of the actors and actresses like Victoria Justice and Noah Schnapp like they did, and they turned out a terrible film, so do not watch this movie. Next up, this movie is very, very disappointing. I was really hoping that I wouldn't have to put this on this list, but it really sucked. Pet Sematary Bloodlines. I love that original 1989 Pet Sematary movie. It's one of my favorites. I think it's one of the most compelling Stephen King adaptations, books, movies. I love that story, and I think that there was a good opportunity to have a pretty nice little companion piece to the 2019 remake in this prequel about Judd, following the Timmy Baterman stuff that they kind of left on the cutting room floor for that 2019 remake. And you could have had a really interesting kind of development, show why Judd is the way he is, why he stayed behind. They could have had more emotional resonance, but that's really the issue. It feels like they try to make all these cheap, unearned relationships feel more emotional than they are, because what's really weighty about Pet Sematary is how difficult the decision is bringing back loved ones, even if it's at the cost of them not coming back the same. It's just the whole desperation aspect of it is totally cut from this movie, and you don't actually feel the relationship between Judd, his buddy, and Timmy, where they kind of try to sell you on that friendship, but it doesn't feel like they actually care about him. It doesn't feel like Judd's bummed that he has to get Timmy Baterman and potentially kill him and stop him. It just feels like a minor inconvenience to him. Now his lifelong friend has to be put down. They should have made this so much more emotional, sad. It could have had so much weight behind it, but instead they opt for pretty much the dumbest version of this movie that they could have possibly made. I was so butthurt by how disappointing this movie was. It just... I don't even know. Not the worst movie at all. On a baseline level, it's probably entertaining, but I just can't separate my emotions and my attachment to this franchise. So I just felt so fucking disappointed from this. So it definitely deserves to be on this list. Now, number two. Number two is the single most disappointing movie that is on this list. This was probably my most anticipated, or one of my second or third most anticipated movies of the year. I was really looking forward to this. I thought that this was where the tide could turn on this franchise, because, you know, things were starting to not look good, and this only further emphasized that. And I'm talking about Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania. I don't know what the hell they did to this thing, but you could tell at certain points that there was a much better cut in there. I think some of it has to do with the fact that they apparently changed the ending a month before the movie came out, reshoots to add stupid jokes. This movie has all the earmarks of an insecure version of the MCU, where they don't know how to take anything seriously, they don't know how to treat anything with actual weight, so they add in stupid gags, bad CGI, MODOK, terrible jokes, and it clashes so much because anything with Jonathan Majors as Kang, and, you know, separate it from the real life controversy, he was great in this role, and easily the best part of this movie, but anything that had gravitas because of him was just totally wiped away by all the dumb jokes, dumb plot lines, very unfocused story. You could tell this thing was hacked up, reshot a ton of times, that they didn't stick with original ideas. This movie really fucking disappointed me, and I'm honestly, honest to God, sad that I couldn't have this higher, that Marvel has continued this decline that they've been on for a little while now, and this movie pretty much has every single bad criticism that I've had of the MCU, turns up the dial to 10. It has all of them really bad, all the stuff that I've just come to kind of detest about some of these more recent movies. Totally hollow. It's that classic thing of ChatGPT feeling dialogue and jokes. This movie felt like it was made for a bunch of clapping seals. So, you know, that's the second to last worst on the list for me, just because of personal disappointment. Even though I would say there's some movies on this list that I would say are a good amount worse. But it's just the laziness of this movie offends me. The amount of hype that I had, what they could have done, I'm just so disappointed. But now for the number one worst movie of the year on my list after everything. This movie is god awful. I don't know if any of you have seen this franchise before. It's kind of become a weird tradition with me and my girlfriend that we watch the new one every year, and this is the last one, and they're always terrible, always unwatchable. We always debate whether we'll shut it down because they always tend to get this bad, but this one is fucking ridiculously bad. The flaws have never been more pronounced in this franchise. Everything wrong with it. You just have this scummy, toxic individual. He's just literally a piece of shit, but like for some reason the story acts like he's not the biggest piece of shit ever. They're like, oh, he's flawed, but he's getting better. No, he's a piece of garbage. He does not get better. He sucks. He's literally awful. And then on top of that, the actual co-star of the movie, Josephine Langford, doesn't show up until 80% of the movie is already over. The whole thing's this weird side quest with Hardin, who's just a piece of shit. And then the movie just ends with him getting back together with her, them getting married. Literally, there's nothing about their relationship in this movie. It is terrible. You could tell that the last one was supposed to be the last one, but they still had a little bit that they wanted to tell. They wanted to stretch out the ending a little bit longer. So they put up this half-baked final movie, which thank Christ this is the last one, because this movie is god-awful. This franchise is god-awful. I don't even know what to make of it. It's so fucking bad. I guess you could get a laugh out of it by clowning on it and how stupid it is, how bad it is, and just how ass backwards the moral of the movie is. But for all of the flaws, this is 100% the worst in the franchise. Somehow, it has the weakest story, the weakest script, weakest characters, and Hardin's never been more insufferable. So for that, this definitely comes out on top as the worst fucking movie of 2023, bar none, hands down. Give this movie the medal because it is a grade A piece of shit. But that's just my list. Worst movies of 2023. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. What is the worst movie that you've seen this year? Love to hear it. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.